Are we rolling right now?
We are.
Oh, well, okay. So welcome to this edition of the Beacon of Light podcast. I'm Tony. This is Sarah.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are meeting with Jeff Olsen. Now, I have to preface, Jeff, that this podcast is designed primarily to assist individuals because, of course, with Beecon Recovery and talking about how we as human beings can avoid the pitfalls of being, well, addicted to drugs and or alcohol. Now, what my hope is, what I'm looking forward to is to have you share your story.
Okay.
And as the listeners are listening to your story, I want them to do what I did. Is to visualize yourself in that spot, and they're going to hear your spot in a minute. And believe me, everybody, it's a spot. But picture yourself there, and then as he goes through his story, put yourself there. And the part of the story that I want them to focus on the most, for the purposes of this podcast, is the pain that you endured and the choice that you made. Because we oftentimes turn to drugs and or alcohol when we're in all kinds of pain. Do you know what I mean?
I totally get it. Yes.
Somebody just entered Harvey the Bus with a gift for
Tony's
Tony.
got a running. Thank you. I have a running
Emily.
nose. So I hope that makes sense to you, right? I mean, what did Jeff do? Right.
Right.
In that moment, and in those have to be seemingly, I don't even know how many moments.
Yeah.
I have something to add to that, if you don't mind.
I actually do.
Okay.
Oh, come on. That was ha ha. Okay. Yeah.
Well, no, so as a storyteller and a writer, I challenge myself, and I work with a lot of artists to present this challenge because I think it's a creative challenge. We have our stories, and we have our stories that we have told many times. And a lot of people in recovery are in this position as well. I have a recovery story. Tony has a recovery story of what happened and how we came to be free. And so what I was taught is that a story is alive. And the more we tell our story, the more alive it becomes and the more mature that it becomes, and it changes. And so the invitation of Harvey the Bus, and I think storytelling itself, is tell the story as you are today, as the insights that your life has brought you to in this present moment, rather than the story that has been regurgitated in the past.
Well,
and I know you know what I mean, because I know you've told your story so many times.
But we have to tell that part of the story.
Of course, yeah.
To have us appreciate where we are today. So I think you were going to do that anyways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I just wanted to extend that invitation because I appreciate the invitation when I'm reminded, like, hey, and you are yourself now, which is a self you haven't yet to be. And so the self that's looking at that story or telling that story, I'm sure sees it differently than you did.
No, that's beautiful. And the beautiful thing about a podcast like this is, yes, there's the story, but now I can observe it.
Right, exactly.
From 27 years across the bridge.
Yeah, that's a long time.
And I can give insights of, well, now I see this clearly. Now I see that clearly. Wow, here's what I learned.
Right.
There, and that took me 15 years.
And the objective is to share all of this with these people that are listening and that are in a place in their crossroads.
Right.
Right? And this is what Jeff has picked up, and this is where Jeff has learned and come. So take us to the event.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I will go back 27 years ago to share the event, but I was in a horrible automobile accident. The whole family was in the car. It was myself, my wife, and our 2 young boys, and single car rollover. And it was an interesting day. I mean, we had just finished celebrating Easter down in southern Utah. It was the Monday morning after Easter Sunday. I'd put the family in the car, buckled the boys in their car seats, got all the luggage in the back.
How old were the boys?
Spencer was 7, And then my youngest, Griffin, was just 14 months, just a toddler.
And your wife in the front seat.
Yeah, wife in the front seat by me.
What's her name?
Tamra.
Okay.
Tamra was 31 and I was 33. I mean, we were kids. Now,
Yeah.
looking back at it, wow, we were kids
Yeah.
having kids.
But in love.
Oh, madly in love, blissfully in love. And I've come to realize what a unique blessing that is.
Yeah.
What, being loved?
Well, being
And being
blissfully
in love, yeah,
being
yeah.
blissfully in love.
Yeah,
when,
it's a
when it's
dream.
easy, when
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
when it just is.
It works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
And it was definitely working. I mean, gosh, we put everyone in the car, and the interesting thing about that day, and I want to point this out too, is we were in the car. I was just putting the car in drive, and Tamara stopped me. Oh, stop! Wait. And I thought she had forgotten something. I left my handbag in the house. No, she said, "Hold on, I just want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time."
Wow.
Now, here's Grandma and Grandpa on the porch waving, as the family pulls off, and I stop the car, and in that moment, I thought, my gosh, women, let's go. We got the car. I was like ready to get on the road, but I noticed and I watched as she ran up on the porch, and she not only hugged Mom and Dad, but she kissed them. And I saw this. I noticed it. Wow. She kissed Mom and Dad, and that was not uncommon.
I was going to say, is that a common thing?
It was not uncommon. No, I mean, it was a very affectionate family, but I just noticed it. I noticed how she hugged and kissed them. She ran back to the car and jumped in, and I put the car in drive and headed for the interstate.
What time of day is this?
This is mid-morning,
Okay. Okay.
10, 11. And the reason I bring that up is she must have felt a whisper. She must have felt a nudge. She must have had a feeling or an insight or an intuition. Stop, I've just got to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time, because as the day played out, that was the final goodbye. I hit the interstate. I cranked it up to 75 miles an hour, which is fast as I could legally go. I set the cruise control, and away we were driving up the road. And there was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a red pickup truck that was driving erratically and cutting people off. One of the most difficult parts of the story is I believe that I dozed off. I think I just dozed off
For a
just
second.
a second.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I fell asleep. It's like I dozed off, and in doing, I had swerved to the right, I overcorrected to the left, and lost control of the car, and it began to roll, not off the road, but down the road on that hard concrete at 75 miles an hour. And it was a horrific automobile accident. I mean, the accident reports say we rolled at least 6 to 8 times. I blacked out for the actual crash. I realized, I've lost control of the car, and I blacked out. But when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old, Spencer, that was right behind me. I heard him crying, hysterically crying, and that snapped me into, wow, okay, I've got to get to my boy.
Are you on all fours or on upside down?
I don't even remember.
Wow.
I don't even know. All I knew is the car had stopped. I was able to sit. I don't recall hanging in the seatbelt or anything.
Yeah.
But I heard him crying, and I thought, I've got to get to him. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned. I don't know if it was to the floorboard or the seat. I don't know the orientation of the car. But I couldn't move. And I knew I was struggling to breathe. And there was intense pain, but there was such adrenaline in that situation. I had no idea of my injuries. What had actually happened is both of my legs were crushed. I mean, my left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. My back was broken in 2 places. My right arm was almost torn off. My left arm was all messed up. And then the seatbelt had cut through and ruptured all my intestines. And my rib cage had been damaged, and my lungs were collapsing. So yeah, I was not
In a position to
do anything.
Yeah.
But I knew my son was crying, and I had to get to my son. But that's when the brutal reality hit that no one else was crying. And I knew. I mean, I saw, and I won't go into all the details, but I knew that my wife was gone, and I knew that my toddler son was gone. They were killed instantly in the accident. And that was a pretty hopeless.
And you're sitting there stuck.
I'm stuck. I can't move. And I'm fighting to keep consciousness. It's funny, I had an exchange with Spencer, my 7-year-old, because he's crying hysterically. And I was even struggling to speak, but I remember telling him, hold on, son, it's going to be okay. And he recalls this.
Really?
Yeah, he recalls this exchange, but that's when I began to lose consciousness. Just, it went. But I share this for the contrast. I mean, that was the worst hell I'll ever be in. Here's a hysterical 7-year-old that I can't get to. Half the family's gone. And I was driving the car. It was like, can't I get those 3 seconds back? What happened? And the guilt, the regret, the remorse, the panic. I mean, absolute panic.
Dang.
And, yeah.
Can you? I have nothing. I have, as we go through our lives, and anybody that's listening, right, they may be thinking the same thing. I have absolutely nothing in my life that comes close to that, right? I mean, do you? Who normally would? And so that's what I'm putting myself in that position, thinking, I can't even. Do you know?
Well, yes. However,
Dang.
I feel like we all
Get what we get.
our experiences are different.
Yeah.
But our emotions are universal. I
Yeah.
mean, our emotions are universal. But this was deeply
Yeah.
emotional, and in that darkness, in that panic, in that regret, in all of it, the chaos. I mean, I felt light come. Like, here I am in the darkest moment of my life, and I feel light come, tangible light comes and surrounds me. And suddenly I can breathe. Suddenly there's no pain. Suddenly it feels like I'm rising above the accident scene, like I'm rising above it. And then as I come to terms with, like, what's happening, suddenly my wife, Tamara, who I knew was gone at the scene,
Oh, wow.
suddenly she's there in the light with me, and she's very much alive, radiant, beautiful, gorgeous. But she's emphatic that I can't stay. She's like, you've got to go back.
But you don't want to go. You want to go with her, don't you?
No, because suddenly I'm delivered
Yeah.
from this, chaos.
Do you know? Do you know that is what? Do you recognize? Wait a minute. My physical body might be dying right now, and I might be going to my. Do you come to that? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I wasn't processing anything like that.
Right.
I'm just like, wow, she's here, and she's alive, and
Yeah.
and it felt very physical, but even in a multiplied way. Like, I could taste her tears. And she was emotional. She's like, you got to go back. You got to go back. You can't stay. Wow. You can't come. I mean, somehow she knew. And I mean, just some context. She had laid her seat back and was sleeping when the accident happened. She was still holding onto my hand. But because her seat was reclined, the seat belt didn't restrain her properly.
Yeah.
And it was head trauma that took her life so quickly. And I was aware of that. But here she was. Perfect. And we're having this conversation. She's like, look, if you stay, Spencer, our little 7-year-old, will be orphaned. And somehow she knew she wasn't coming back, but she's like, you've got to go back. And we made this deal. Like, okay, I'll go back. And it may be the most profound goodbye I ever will say. But we made a deal. And I gave my word, I'm going back. And it's strange how powerful our thoughts are. Yeah. Like, I didn't have to figure out, how do I go back? How do I just, the intention, the thought, I'm going back.
But you are going to go back to her.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I had this experience where it was so real. And I've done all the research. Skeptics can say, well, the oxygen in your brain was shutting down, you were hallucinating, and okay,
Whatever.
fine. But to me,
it's real.
it was so real, and we said goodbye. I made the choice to come back, and then it was like, whoosh, like, boom,
Right back to hell.
And I'm finding myself. Well, not immediately. I actually went whisked like boom in a thought. I was wandering about a level 1 trauma center, ER center, moving about, experiencing the doctors, the nurses, the
Wait,
families.
but walking around.
Well,
Or floating around.
Floating
or
around.
Something
it
around.
felt as if I was wandering about
Yeah.
the hospital. And yet I had a 360-degree awareness of everything. The patients, the doctors, the nurses, the families of the patients. It's like everything was present. And I have no concept of time in this bubble of light, this goodbye. I mean, I later found out that people arrived on the scene. And interesting enough, the first 2 people on the scene, and we'll maybe get to this, were Elisa and Ryan Evans, who you may know. Yeah.
I do. And so, and Elisa, who happens to be RN.
Yeah.
And that's where the Justin thing, who's going to be a podcast guest here in a minute,
Yeah.
where everything just, there's no, we teach this. There are no accidents.
Right.
Where that she was, of all the people, and then we'll talk about hopefully how many years later, you're like, wait,
Yeah.
that was you?
Yeah. So
Right?
is this
And,
thing?
by the way, she just met your brother and such at that thing we were at your house.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yep.
That's the first time she saw them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I think she met them at my father's funeral. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
years that accordion and claps in. But
Yeah.
people arrived on the scene. They were able to do emergency procedures. They had medical training. I mean, I was, Spencer was seen too, my 7-year-old, and he was banged up. He bruised his ribs and cracked his wrist, but he basically walked away from the accident. With my injuries, I had to be extricated from the car and then airlifted or life-flighted to the nearest level 1
Well,
trauma
didn't
center.
he go spend time with Elisa's son? Isn't there some kind of connection there between those two, or no?
No, that goes down the road. We'll
Okay.
get to
Okay,
all
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
We'll get to all that.
Okay.
But I was life-flighted to this level 1 trauma center, but I was unaware of any of that. All I knew is I'd crashed the car. I'd said this profound goodbye. I'd made a choice, and here I was moving about, wandering about the hospital. And everyone I saw, the doctors, the nurses, the families of the patients themselves, like I had this awareness, but everyone I saw, I knew them perfectly. It's like they were me and I was them. A nurse passed by and completely unaware of me. But I in a moment know her life as if it's my own. I mean, I felt it. I experienced, or at least was aware of in a very acute way, the abuse that she received as a child. I was very much aware of it. And yet in that same moment, I'm like, but look at her. Wow, look at this magnificent soul. Serving, healing, I mean.
And this all comes to you in an instant.
In an instant.
The recognition and the knowledge of all of it, there's no, it just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's interesting because I came from a conservative Christian background. I even had a biblical verse. I mean, I'm seeing these people. And this verse is something Jesus said when he said, inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of one of these, you've done it unto me, which I thought was a nice verse about being nice, right? But there was a whole different depth here. Suddenly I thought, wow, they are me. Mm-hmm. I am them, that we are one. There was this oneness. There was this connection to everyone I saw and encountered. And that was a mind-blowing, beautiful thing. I mean, judgments and comparisons just went out the window.
Hold on. Was it fun? It had to have been so much fun for you. I mean, given the circumstances, but I'm talking about this recognition of how beautiful and simple it actually is.
Yeah, it was beyond fun. I would call it absolutely joyful. It's like, oh my gosh, we are all connected. I know them, they know me. We're all one. There's truly a connection here. Now, given the trauma and everything, I don't know that I was having fun. I was a little bit, I'm going to say greatly enlightened and that might have been confusing, but with the enlightenment
Well-
was so great. It's like there was no confusion, but I still wasn't really like what's going on.
Yeah, well, and you hadn't, I don't think, based on what you shared, floated, meandered, whatever, to your room of that hospital yet.
No,
Yeah.
no. And yet eventually, as I moved about, just seemingly knowing where to go, but not even knowing
Where you're going.
where I'm going,
Yeah.
I came across a body laying on the gurney, motionless, but I felt nothing from it. And I thought, well, that's weird given this connection I'm experiencing. So I stepped forward and looked closer, and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, that
It's me?
is me.
Oh.
That's me. But it wasn't me. I was having this.
Well, hold on a sec. Was there anybody around you working on you?
In my experience, it was like tunnel vision.
Okay.
It was like tunnel vision. Now, there's an other part of this story which is also interesting, and interesting enough, the first people on the scene have become friends to me in my life.
Dear friends.
Yes, the attending ER physician became a dear friend in my life, but I didn't encounter any of that as I stepped forward. It's such tunnel vision. It's like, wow, there's my body. There's my flesh suit, and it was a mess. I mean, it was, and there was this great reverence and realization about the body. I had always taken my body for granted. My gosh, I'd been an athlete. I played Division I football. I didn't realize that I didn't have to remind my heart to beat. I didn't have to teach my eyes how to see. And there I am looking at the body lifeless, thinking, wow, I took it for granted, and now it's so busted. But I knew I was to get back in. And once again, it was the intention, it was the thought, I'm going back in. And we could spend an hour talking about that process and what I learned and what came about, but the intention of going back in, then boom, I'm back in the body. And that was heavy. And the pain returned, the guilt returned, the grief returned, the regret returned, the trauma. I was ventilated. They had a tube down my throat doing the breathing for my lungs. My legs were obviously immobile. My right arm was immobile. They eventually tied down my left arm because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. And I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. I had 18 surgeries in total as they tried to piece me back together between the legs and the shoulders and the ruptured intestines. And I mean, it had ripped me so wide open. In fact, my femoral artery was exposed, but somehow was not severed, which was really bizarre.
And they've got to wait between surgeries for you to heal enough to do the next surgery.
Yep.
And it's got to be frustrating as all get out because, you're pretty much powerless and helpless to the situation, except please let me get recovered quickly. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is an interesting point. Dr. O'Driscoll, who was the attending ER physician, he and a nurse had an experience in the arena. And I didn't see them. I'm just focusing on my body.
Yeah.
And I got to get back in. But they shared with me later, months after. I was in ICU for I don't know how long. I mean, weeks on end. And I would, more surgeries, back into ICU. I mean, it was back and forth. But they had an experience where they felt, and Dr. O'Driscoll shares that he saw Tamara's soul, her spirit. He saw it in the operating room standing above my gurney, and she communicated with him. And we became friends over this. The miracle is that here a clinical, clinician staffs, a very credible doctor and nurse came and shared with me when I was out of ICU. It was months after the accident, a month, 2 months, something like that. I'm still in the hospital. I'm still very sick, but they shared what had happened to them in the operating room. So that was interesting. And then these people come in your life, yeah.
Now, it's at this moment that I want to make the correlation. Now, you're in this ICU, back and forth, hospital. There has to be excruciating pain.
Yes.
Now, do you have one of them buttons?
Yes, I do. And this is where we can really talk about.
This is, okay, because this is where it starts.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in varying degrees, it starts in varying ways in reference to how it's not pushing the button. It's given a prescription, that kind of thing. to alleviate, obviously, a lot
The
of
pain.
physical pain.
They put me
And
on morphine. I was on morphine.
Is it one? Could you do that?
And it was the self press button that I could do with my one left arm that was working. And here's what I learned for me. The physical pain was intense, but the emotional pain,
Did that help with the emotional pain as well?
it was an escape.
There it is.
It was an escape from the reality I was
Of where you
experiencing.
are.
The grief.
Yeah.
Yes, the physical pain, the emotional grief, the regret, the trauma of, wow, half the family's gone. I lost my wife and my son. I cannot bear it. And I
Boom.
would just hit that button till it knocked me out. And
And there's relief.
well, and yeah, there's relief. And so I think
Not from the physical pain.
from
Yeah.
the emotional trauma.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, for me, I had plenty of physical pain, but it was the emotional trauma that I was seeking an escape from. I just want to feel different.
But right there is a correlation, because
Yeah.
it's the same with so many of us. Then when we're taking that drink, popping that pill, shooting that needle, it's the emotional trauma,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Yeah.
an escape.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an addiction to the drug. I think it's an addiction to the escape.
the feeling.
I've got to be relieved
Yeah.
from the trauma I'm experiencing.
Yep.
I've got to be relieved from what feels like my reality right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would hit that button and hit that button. I've also learned, and I probably shouldn't share this, but they didn't know if I was going to make it. Well, give him all the morphine he wants and let him
To let him have a
Peacefully.
quality of life on the way out.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
But yeah,
Okay.
I survived all that. But it was, and coming off the morphine. Now I was under medical supervision. I mean, I was in the hospital, but I had strange withdrawals and all kinds of stuff coming off the morphine.
Hold on a sec. Now I want to skip forward a little bit, right?
Yeah.
To now you're released from the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Now you don't have this anymore, but you have to have some sort of prescription for something at this moment.
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, they'd given me lower tab coming out of the hospital, and quite honestly, the physical pain was such, and the emotional pain was such. I was eating lower tab like peanut M&Ms, Now the interesting thing about the body, or about what my body did, I got to a point that if I took a lower tab, I would literally projectile vomit. Like my body's saying no.
I'm not doing this anymore.
No.
Your liver was like, I've had it.
Yeah, and I mean, my friends and family that were around me, that they were aware of this. They if I took the tablet, the pill.
So at that
boom,
moment, do you
out it
say,
came.
"Hey, doc, lower tab doesn't work. Can you try this instead?"
Well, here's the interesting thing, and I'll share this because there was another experience, out of body, near death experience in the hospital that shifted my perspective on this a little bit.
This being
This,
taking these pills for this emotional and physical pain.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was a choice I made, and I suppose my body supported it in projectile vomiting, but I decided that I was going to feel it all. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to mask any of it. The only way to heal from it was to feel it. And
You decided to experience the physical and emotional pain. Going to go through all of it.
yeah, I was going to feel it all. And that came about with another out-of-body experience, which was the end of my hospital stay. I mean, it's worth pointing out the most profound out-of-body experiences were at the point of the accident, before the morphine had been administered, and then at the end of my hospital stay, where I was taking some Tylenol and lower tab as needed, but I wasn't on heavy narcotics necessarily. I mean, I suppose lower tab is a narcotic, but it was nothing like the morphine.
Yeah.
Intravenous morphine was pretty intense.
Intense, yeah.
But I went to sleep one night, and it's crazy because I was finally able to lay on my side. They had stabilized my abdominal injury so that my guts weren't spilling out, and the infections and everything. I mean, it was a horrible bout in the hospital, but I was finally able to lay on my side. I'd laid on my back so long the back of my head had been rubbed bald. I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. And we're about 5 months in at the hospital here. But I fell asleep, and I became aware that I was sleeping. I mean, I'm sleeping, but I'm aware, wow, I'm really sleeping peacefully. this might be the most peaceful rest I've had during this whole hospital endeavor. And as I was aware of that, I felt that light come again, that same light as at the accident, like surrounding me. And then it felt as if I was rising above the hospital bed. And yet this time the light, it dispensed. It went away. And I was in just the most beautiful, peaceful place. I mean, people can say heaven, the other side, the spirit world. The only word that comes close to what I was experiencing is I was home. I was home and I was whole. I had both legs and both feet. In fact, I began to run. And it was surprising because it was such a, I want to say physical experience.
Yeah.
Apparently I was out of the body, but I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet.
As you're saying this, it's taking me to a scene of Avatar.
Yeah, yes.
Right, where that guy, he's like, he shows his toes digging into the dirt, and he just takes off running. Like, oh crap, was it something like that visualization?
Yes, when I saw there are two films I cried in.
Yeah.
One was the old original Gladiator when he was in that field and he could feel the top of the wheatgrass.
Russell Crowe, yeah.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I saw Avatar and his feet were on the ground.
And he took
people
off.
probably thought, what's wrong with that guy, sitting there
Were you bawling?
weeping in the cinema. I'm weeping in the theater there.
Oh, fun.
But yeah, both those.
Yeah.
But I could feel everything. I could feel the intelligence in my calves and thighs, and I'm running joyfully, thinking I'm home, and I'm whole. And then I had a download, if you will, that I wasn't there to stay. And there was this corridor off to the left, and I knew intuitively I'm to go that way. And I began to work down that way, and at the end of the corridor was a crib. And my little son Griffin had still been sleeping in a crib at the time of the accident. He was only 14 months old. He was trying to climb out of his crib at that point. But I raced to this crib, and I had had so much trauma around my little boy. And as I raced the crib, I look in the crib, and there he is. And he's sleeping, and he's beautiful, and he's perfect. It was just like, Tamara. And I swept him up in my arms, and it was so real, so physical. I mean, have you ever picked up a sleeping child? There's a weight.
A smell, there's a weight,
yes.
a breath.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I held him up, and I could feel him, and I could feel him breathing. I could feel his breath on my neck, and I leaned over, and I smelled his hair. And I'm like, this is my boy, and he's okay. And I began to weep, holding on to him, thinking, wow, do I really get to say goodbye to him too? And yet, as I held him, there was this intense presence behind me, this overwhelming, cosmic, powerful, wise presence coming closer and closer, and I'm holding my son and I'm weeping. And this presence is coming closer and closer, and given my upbringing, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh.
Is this God?
That's God. And the guilt began to rise up. I'm in so much trouble. I mean, my little boy's life was cut short because I screwed up or fell asleep or overcorrected, and he's here because of my mess up.
Yeah.
And this presence is coming closer and closer, and I'm holding my little boy, and the guilt is bubbling up, and the presence is right behind me, and I don't dare turn around.
Are you afraid?
I'm afraid. And I have this thought, I hope I can be forgiven. And with that thought, and this felt physical too, like these divine arms just wrapped around and held me and my little boy, and then all the fear, it went away. And this download, it's just like the lid came off, and this download of peace and love.
And the presence is gone now.
No, I'm still in the arms. In fact, it felt as if.
Oh.
And this is difficult sometimes to say. I became that. We melded into one. I can say I was held in the arms of God, but it's like me and my little boy became the divine. And I was held. I was being held in this divine circle. And it's as if the entire universe held me. It's as if this presence, this all there is, was honoring and witnessing me and my silly little life and the grief, and I mean, it was, and yeah, I saw my life. You know, I began to see my life. I saw, and I'm sitting there trying to explain. Well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. You know, and this divine being that held me said, "What did you learn?" Just the question, but what did you learn? And I saw things. I thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway. And the being that held me said, well, that's your judgment of it, not ours. And it felt multiple, masculine, feminine, not ours. We love you. You are as precious and beloved and as divine as that child you hold. And here I am holding my little boy. You know, I mean, this is my boy. And yet I felt like, wow, I'm in the arms of the divine and I'm their boy. And it was multiplied and yet it was personal.
This is my boy and I'm their boy.
Yeah, it was so personal, but I knew it expanded out to every living soul.
But can I just interject a question here for you that I'm sure you probably pondered, and I know with your training in mind.
Yeah.
But was it that thing? Oh, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
But what did you learn? Which takes it from a mistake to an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And the only way you can grow is by having that experience that we perceive as a mistake. But in actuality, it's not a mistake, even though your legs are chopped off, your guts are hanging out, and all these things are happening. As horrific as this story is that we're hearing, and is it a mistake?
Yeah.
It was all that.
It was an experience. This is the interesting
that brought
things.
you to where you are right now at this moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the arms of the divine, I realized, in fact, it's really two things. I was asking why.
Why is all this happening to me?
Why is all this happening to me?
Yeah.
And it was like, well, you created it, and we loved you that much. Your soul longed for this experience, and we allowed this. I'm like, well, why? What do you do? What do you do up here? You know, I mean, I'm still kind of angry.
Yeah.
I allow. And this was,
This is your creation.
Wow, yeah. Tim, I loved you enough to leave, and Griffin broke your heart in ways that you could never imagine. And Spencer chose to stay and walk with you even if you limp. But there was this divine order to things. And yet as I'm in the arms of what God, the divine, whatever one wants to call it, I'm told that I get to exercise my will. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute, because I'm still, there's the conditioning, right? It's like I've been taught since I was little, it's your will be done.
Yeah.
And this beautiful being communicated, my will is your will. That's how much we love you. My will is that you have free will, that you get to choose. And you can be pissed off at God the rest of your life. That's okay.
Your choice.
We love you anyway, because this happened, or this was allowed to happen. Or you can beat yourself up for the rest of your life because you were driving the car.
Still a choice.
Still a choice. And here I am holding my boy, and I'm presented a third choice. You can give your son back. You can hand him over in trust and exercise your will in letting go. And it may not feel like he was ripped from you. And in all that love, and in all that peace, and in all that beauty, and this wisdom that was flowing, I kissed my little boy, and I handed him back. And then boom, back in the hospital bed to the amputation, and the legs in a brace, and the arms in a sling, and the colostomy bag is handling the ruptured intestines, and it didn't change overnight. I don't want anyone to think, well, I had this horrible accident, and then I had these experiences, and then I was fine.
And prove you're good.
No, horrible accident, profound experiences, but I grieved and suffered like anyone would.
When you and I were talking at that event, which by the way was magical in and of itself.
That was a good event, yes.
That was magic. When I walked in and Jules was telling her story, but when we went to the backyard with all these candles, we walked in that thing you all created.
Yeah.
And then I pointed at what I thought. Remember
Yeah.
I was like, what in the world? It was so pretty. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was a great event.
It's Venus. Venus. You saw Venus up in the sky.
And
That's
by the
what you
way,
saw.
this boy can cook. So, but it was in that moment that I'm like, you know what? I got to get this. I got to get Jeff on. We've been friends for how many years? I mean, since
Oh gosh, it's been
a few minutes.
at least a decade,
It's
probably
been,
more.
Yeah, when we first met at Impact, I think when you were sharing this story, but not in this detail, right?
Yeah,
Because you don't
no.
have time in that context.
No.
But I knew I had to have you on, and I'm telling you right now, we got to have him back on again. So we're going to have a part 2 because this story.
We can have a part 2, and I'm honored to be here. And when we connected, it's
Well,
there's-
it was
yeah.
at your house when I said, you know what?
Yeah.
I just the same thing with Justin when I was staffing Quest.
Yeah.
Right. It just came to me. You got to get him on the podcast. Right. And that's when I said to Justin, he's like, well, you know, Justin, well, what are we? And you're all going to get a treat in a minute. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Just like I told you before we started here. I don't know exactly how or what, but we're gonna.
Yeah.
Because these people, hearing this story, get to know. Well, let me ask you this, because I think you shared this with me in your home. What are you taking for your pain now? Because you're still in pain as we speak.
I am, but I take turmeric and ginger, and it's all herbal stuff. I've gone totally holistic, and it's working. I still experience pain. She's become. I laugh and say, pain's my most frequent lover. She just shows up and reminds me I'm alive.
Wait,
and
once
that's
again,
okay.
what pain are we talking about right now? Are we talking about physical or
Physical
emotional?
pain. I'm talking about physical pain.
So what about the emotional pain?
Well, the emotional pain.
I think it's always going to be there, but in a much lesser of a degree. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and here's where we can kind of back into this experience and how it aligns with Impact and what happened when we met. And
Yeah.
I mean, here I am in the arms of God, and I'm being told it's your will, my will.
Yeah.
And I'm believing that life's a test, and I have failed the test. I crashed the car, half the family's gone. And it's communicated to me, life is not a test, it's a gift. Mm-hmm. It's a gift. Now, everything I thought I believed had been turned inside out and upside down. Religion didn't make sense. Well, how do I, show up at my congregation and say, hey, there's no judgment. It's all good, where it just, and it's all conditioning. It's religion, right? It's like, well, and yet I fumbled around for years. Like, you mean there's no right or wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Wait.
Do whatever I want, right?
Years.
Years. I
Yeah.
didn't go to Impact till 10 years after the accident.
There's something I want to say about that, because you were talking about pain and emotional pain, and the
Yeah.
emotional pain still exists. And I just finished a book. I can't remember the author, but it's called Falling Upward. Have you heard of this book, Falling Upward?
I haven't, but I like the title.
It sounds kind of cool, don't it?
Yeah.
It talks about the wisdom that you are graced with in the second half of your life. And he says, in the second half of your life, when you realize more about what's really going on here, which is what you're describing, what's really going on here, what you come to carry is what he describes as a bright sorrow. And so the pain is, there's a brightness and there's a gratitude for the pain, deep gratitude, and it comes from deep acceptance, where you wouldn't change your life, you love your life, and you realize that you would not have one without the other, and you would not be yourself in any other way. And the other thing that I was just like having so much empathy for who Tony and I call our people, those who are suffering in addiction, and they are suffering. Self-inflicted pain, like injecting needles into abscesses kind of pain, is that you keep hitting the button, and what you had, which is so beautiful, is you had love and trust in the divine. You could stop pushing that button because you could trust. Not to say that it was easy. I know that it's not. And I think one thing that our people really suffer from is there is no trust. It's like, well, if I stop pushing this button, what else is there? Because there is so much trauma, so much childhood trauma and generational trauma to where there is no trusted love relationship where that person feels like they can stop pushing the button.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, because for them, their button is the needle or the bottle or the pills or all of the above. That's their button.
well, so I feel like, Tony, when you talk about the beacon of light and wanting to share stories and serve our people, is that it's us. Like,
Well,
Yeah.
it is us
It
that
is.
is the
Yeah.
alternative.
well, like you're saying, when you're enwrapped in the arms of God,
Mm-hmm.
you realize that there's no separation between you and God. And what Sarah's saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is there's no separation between these people that are suffering and us, because we are them and they are us, which is right in line with Hans and the impact. Agreed?
Right. Yes. Yes. And the realization, which is why I put away the lower tab, is I'm here to feel it.
Yes.
I'm here to experience it.
Yeah.
I chose this.
Yeah.
Some-
Why rob
somehow my
yourself
soul-
of that experience?
Yeah. Somewhere my soul said, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that where I was running to escape the emotional pain,
Yep.
and sometimes the physical pain, but more emotional than physical, by running from it, by escaping from it, I would never heal it. I would never heal it. Now, you know,
Yeah.
I won't sit and say, well, I'm overjoyed and thrilled that my wife and child died and that I'm limping around on one leg. I don't feel that way yet. But I do
You
know
probably
this.
never will feel that way either.
No, I do know this. I've learned things I would have never learned.
Yeah.
My soul has expanded in ways it would never expand.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an empathy and a compassion that I would never have
Yeah.
had I not walked this journey.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's where I find peace. Is it's not happening to me, it's happening
For me. Yep.
Well, and that's
And,
the other
yeah.
side. That's the other side of love.
Yeah.
You would only have that kind of expansion had the love been as pure, real, and complete as it was.
Yes.
And I was noticing that in your story, and I understand that, and I've had that experience as well,
Yeah.
where I've known a love like that, and I've lost a love like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt that when we talked on the phone. I didn't know that, but I'm like, she knows.
Yeah.
She knows.
Well,
and
and
yeah.
here's the interesting and fun for me. I use that word fun, joy.
Yeah.
You know, the way we met and what we get to do together for our tribe.
Yeah.
Because this is the tribe that, quite frankly, Jeff, as a society, we don't care about these people. We really don't. I know we want to say we do, but as a society, we actually don't. And somebody has to stand up for these people because God wants somebody to stand up for these people. And moreover, he wants these people to stand up for these people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it'd be really easy for you to be taking whatever drug it is that you were taking for whatever reason. And that's what happens with a lot of us, present company included. We make a choice to escape not so much the physical, but the emotional pain that we are carrying from limiting beliefs as a child, right? Because that's what we're taught. We're taught these limiting beliefs from a very young age. And we believe these things.
Yeah.
So we use these substances, and they call them spirits for a reason, right? I mean, if we're talking about spirits, I mean, that's why they're called spirits,
Yeah.
right? But to hear your story, right? And then what I'd like to do right now, if you don't mind, because that's one of the things that's going to tie into Justin here in a minute. Tell me about why Impact for Jeff? Why Impact for Jeff Olsen?
Well, it's an interesting story.
Okay.
And I've watched family members go through recovery, you know, and I do care. I did care. When it's someone you love and you see, again, the masking of the pain, that's how it was. Spencer, my son, the one that survived the accident at age 7, is the one that invited me to Impact. He went with his cousin. His little cousin was getting married. She was my favorite little niece, and, you know, she wanted to go do Impact training, and she wanted her big cousin to come and go with her. And they did. And Spencer really connected. And he kept saying, Dad, I know you get a lot of this stuff, but you got to come do this. And he's my boy. I'll interject a quick story about him. I mean, here was, you talked about going home, being released from the hospital and, and all of that. Yeah, I mean, I was in a wheelchair. I had one leg, my right leg's in a brace, my right arm's in a sling. I can drive the electric wheelchair with my left hand, and that's how I'm returning home. My brothers, who are my heroes, they'd have to actually lift me up and put me in the chair so I could
These
get
are guys
around.
that came in the other night,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And we're going home, but I'm going home to my brother's house. I still needed home health and physical therapy and everything else. And Spencer, a 7-year-old, I mean, he's lost everything I've lost. He lost his mother, he lost his brother, he lost his father in many ways. I was never going to be the same.
Yeah.
And we're going home, and my brothers come to get me, and they're drive up to the house. They're lifting me out of the car, and I see Spencer looking out the window watching, as his uncles
Or taking his
lift
dad in
his
the wheelchair.
dad
Yeah.
and put him in the wheelchair. And I start driving. They'd put a ramp for me, so I'm driving the ramp. They were emphatic. You do it yourself. They wanted me to be independent, so I'm driving the wheelchair to navigate the ramp, and Spencer comes running out the door. And I'd been so worried, how is he going to accept this? I mean, colostomy bag, amputated leg, wheelchair. I was the rough and tumble dad. And he came out of the house, and he came running toward me, and then he ran right past me. And I thought, it's too much. I mean, he had seen me in the hospital, but this is his turf, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to have to go to the grocery store. Like, this is not working, right? He ran by me, and I thought, it's just too much. And I felt heartbroken and began to navigate toward the ramp to get in the house. And as I turned the wheelchair, I just looked
He's pushing
to
you,
see
isn't
where
he?
he went. No, but he'd run across the street, and he was knocking on all the neighbors' doors.
Dad's home.
He started shouting, Dad's home, Dad's home, come out and see my dad. And I realized that my self-judgments were not his.
Because he's a little boy.
He's a little boy. He's 7. He comes and throws himself on my lap, and I start bawling, and I have this other epiphany. I mean, here I am in a wheelchair, holding my surviving son, and seeing his unconditional love. Suddenly I realized that this is no less divine than holding my son that passed on the other side. Like heaven is
This
right
is why
here.
This is why
Yeah.
Tamara said right here. This is why you had to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we became very close. He
Yeah.
was my best helper. He was my, and then, as he got later in life, he's like, I don't know if I believe you, Dad. You say you went to this other place, you got to hug Mom, you got to tell Griffin goodbye. I got nothing. He's like, I was a little boy, and I was beating my knuckles bloody on that thing you call God, and that door never opened. And he's like, so either you're deceived in some crazy way, or you're making all this stuff up, or if there's some greater power, it doesn't care about me. He was about 20 when this conversation was going on. It's like years I begged.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see my mom.
Yeah.
And I got nothing. So, my heart's breaking, and this is all going on. And
Maybe it might have been better if you didn't even share that with me, Dad. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to bolster his spirits. Anyway, that was the time frame when suddenly he goes with his cousin, my niece.
Wait. Okay, so now I have to ask you, because I've staffed Quest a couple times, and I know you have as well.
Yeah.
Right? There's a shift.
Yeah.
Do you see a difference in Spencer now that
Oh.
you're like, wait a minute? Because is that part of your draw to impact? Whoa, hold on a sec.
Yeah.
Because before, you were behaving this way.
Yeah.
And now, after 3 days, has he gone through Quest or was he liftoff? Where was he?
Well, he hadn't even done the training yet. He hadn't gone to Impact.
Oh, my
he was playing in a rock and roll band. There was drugs involved. Half the band's going to jail. I mean, that's just like,
Yeah.
And I'm panicked about his life and his path.
But he's asking you to do Quest then?
No, it was shortly after that. But this is the time frame. So he's in this seeking
Well, what I'm
place.
asking you, though, is after he does Quest, you see a difference in your son where you're like, wait a minute, I want that for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so he goes and does Quest. And, I experience him coming home. And it's funny, I saw this shift, this openness to him. And then he decided he was going to sell his bass guitar, one of his favorite. He's got all kinds of stuff with strings on it hanging around the house. But he was going to sell this because he wanted to do Summit, which was the next step after Quest.
He wants to finance Summit by selling one of his
his guitar.
And so you're like, whoa, what is going on?
I'm like, whoa, what did they do to you? I mean, I'm the protective, I'm the protective dad.
Yeah.
And he says, no, I'm doing this no matter what. And then he came back from Summit, and suddenly this young man that seemed broken and lost and angry, he's telling me who he is.
Yeah,
and
because that's what we realized after Summit.
Yeah. And so I'm in that energy. And he says, Dad, you got to do this.
Come on in, Justin.
Hey, look who's here.
So this is perfect.
Look who's here.
Perfect.
Justin.
So what we're gonna do?
I'm like, oh, Jeff's still here.
I'm still here.
And the intention here, Justin. Okay, so I'm gonna call a bit of I'm gonna call an audible. Do you have time?
I have time.
Okay, so I'm gonna call, Sarah. I'm gonna call an audible.
I know what that is now. You educated me on it. Thank you.
Okay, Justin. This is Sarah, my co-host.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Sarah, this is Justin, my
Nice to meet
friend.
Nice to meet you.
So the audible is this, and for all you people that are watching, what we were going to do, what I had, was to have you on, do what you have just done, and then have him come over and, take over. But what I'd like to invite you to do now is not leave.
Okay.
And let's just merge these two, because there's so many correlations and so many. We're going to have to do a part 2 on this.
Stay tuned for next week's podcast to find out who is Justin, what is Impact, and how does Jeff's story end. For the first time in 40 years, Impact has a special offer. During the month of February only, for their Quest training. Call Beecon Recovery today for details and to schedule a consultation with Tony Poole. 435-239-8768. That's 435-239-8768.